everybody, it's Sarah and today I'm here with my top 10 favorite books of 2019. I already uploaded my first two books of my 2019 wrap-up videos. The first one was a kind of overview of my 2019 reading, where I talked about what my goals were, whether or not I achieved them, and also a bit about my statistics. And the second one was my top 5 worst reads. Both of those videos will be linked down below and also up there. And now let me just get into my top 10 favorite books of 2019, because I have 10 books to talk about and I do want to talk a bit about each and every one of them. And this list for once will be ranked, so let me just get into my number 10 spot, which goes to Cersei by Madeline Miller, which is also the author of Song of Achilles, which I am currently reading. And this is a retelling of Cersei, although I do not know if it's quite correct to say it's a retelling of Cersei, since Cersei doesn't really have her own story in the Greek myth cycles, but she's just kind of a figure that appears in multiple myths of multiple heroes. And it's also the first book that I read in 2019, so I started off the year quite well. And I just really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the way Cersei was portrayed. I really enjoyed kind of seeing a retelling of a Greek myth that isn't something we know. That's something like I'm personally familiar with, because I'm very familiar with Greek myths and the different myths Cersei appears in, especially the Odyssey. Is it called the Odyssey? Whatever, Odysseus story, and her turning men into pigs. And yeah, I just really enjoyed the way she was characterized. I really enjoyed her voice and seeing the person she becomes, seeing where it comes from that she does the things she does in Greek mythology. Although it's like, I'm talking like it's definite. Where it comes from in the interpretation of Madeline Miller. And yeah, I just overall really enjoyed this book. Next, and by the way, it's kind of funny because I have a couple of 4-star or 4.5-star books in my top 10s and a couple of 5-star books. And sometimes a 4.5-star book will be higher than a 5-star book in this list, which just tells you how like kind of changing my rating system is. Because a lot of times I will rate a book 5 stars just for what it is, because it's perfect for what it is, but a 4.5 stars that I maybe had some issues with will impact me more, and so I will enjoy it more even than a 5-star book, if that makes kind of sense. But anyway, my number 9 spot goes to Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim, which is the first book in the Blood of the Stars series, I think it's called, and this is a Mulan retelling, so already 2 out of 10 done, and 2 of them are retellings. But anyway, this is a Mulan retelling, but our main character doesn't want to be a warrior, she doesn't want to join the war, but her father is told that he has to take part in kind of this fight to become the next royal tailor, since the past royal tailor died. And since her father can't use scissors anymore because his hands have gotten stiff and he is sick, his daughter, who is an expert tailor but isn't allowed to be a tailor because she's a woman, goes to the palace and takes the place of her father's son, and yeah, just takes a place in this fight to become the next royal tailor. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the way Chinese mythology is woven into this. It's also another retelling of another fairy tale, and that's the fairy tale where this person has to weave 3 different dresses, one made of stars, one made of sunshine, and one made of moonlight. And I just love that fairy tale as well. And so I absolutely loved this book. I loved the romance in this book. I thought the chemistry between the 2 characters that fall in love was really well done. And I also really enjoyed the ending of the book. I didn't enjoy the ending. It kind of ends on a cliffhanger, but like, I just overall really enjoyed this book. I really loved the writing of the book. It was a really easy read and it's just beautifully written. Next, what a surprise! I never read contemporaries, but the one contemporary I read this year, the second contemporary I think I read ever, makes it onto my top 10 list of this year of 2019. I think this is going to be on a lot of top 10 lists this year, because this was a very hyped book, and my number 7 spot goes to Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is the romance between the first son of the United States as well as a Prince of England, of Wales. I think he's Prince of Wales, a member of the British royal family anyway. and I just really enjoyed it. It's kind of marketed as an enemies to lovers, which it isn't really, because like their chemistry starts pretty early and they kind of leave all their enemy stuff behind very soon in the book. But I just love the dynamic between the two main characters. I love the way that our main character Alex, who is the first son of the United States, the way his kind of struggle with coming to terms that he's attracted to this guy, that he might be bisexual. I love the way that was portrayed. And yeah, it's just a really fun and quick ride. And it's just, there's not too much depth to this book, but there doesn't need to be. It's just fun. That's all I can say about this book. My number 6 spot goes to The Gilded Wolves by Rajani Chokshi, which is the first book in a series that also came out last year. I read this back in February, I think, and I really enjoyed it. This is kind of an urban historical fantasy set in fin de siècle Paris, and I love the atmosphere of the book, but what I loved most was the characters. This is an ensemble piece, and it centers around a heist story. It centers around this character who kind of wants to steal back his legacy. There's a lot of people who have compared this book to Six of Crows. I can't talk about that because I have never read Six of Crows. What I can talk about though is that all of the characters in this book are incredibly engaging. Their relationships are beautiful. They're like all my babies, basically. The representation in this book is great as well. There isn't a single character, I think, who isn't somehow part of some minority groups and has to deal with like what it means to be part of a minority group. And yeah, I just highly recommend it. The magic system and the world isn't exactly the easiest to get into, so if you're not used to getting into magic systems, maybe don't pick this book up as the first one. But otherwise, there's nothing I could say to like discourage you from picking this book up. On my number 5 spot, I have the first Neil Gaiman book that I read, and that is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I just said that. Anyway, I don't really want to say too much what this story is about because I think it's best going into it blind. But what I can say is that, first of all, I do not know which age group this is written for because it feels like a middle grade. But it's not really. And I think the reason for that is that Neil Gaiman, I think at the back himself, or maybe one of the characters says it during the book, that like myths and fairy tales are meant for children, or are supposed to be, like in today's day and age, are often said that they're for children, but they're really not, and they're really for all ages. And that's what the story feels like. It feels like it's a fairy tale. It feels like it's a dark fairy tale that's with a lot of myths. Although dark fairy tales maybe even isn't correct, because a lot of the fairy tales originally were very dark. I can't even say I love the characters because there's not that much of the characters, but I just love kind of the imagery that Neil Gaiman uses, and I love the atmosphere of this book, and it's absolutely beautifully written. I kind of mixed up at which book I am, so this is actually the number 5 spot, and that is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. I only read this in December, which shows you that you shouldn't kind of do your lists in December unless you like kind of count your year from December to December and not from January to January. Anyway, I don't have the book right here right now because I lent it to my mom. Anyway, this is the story of 12 people living in Britain. Most of them are women. Most of them have some type of black like ancestry. And I absolutely love this. There isn't a lot of plot to the story, but there's just so much depth in each of the personal stories of each of the women and the one non-binary character. And it's kind of hard to explain. The writing style is also beautiful, but I just maybe won't get into too much right now because it can get really long really fast when I talk about this book. But I do have a whole review on this book, which I will leave linked down below and up there as well. On my number 4 spot, I have Queens of Inishlia by Tessa Gretton. I was so surprised how much I love this book. I know there's a lot of mixed feelings on this book. A lot of people do not like it that much because it is a very slow book, which is also why I only gave it 4.5 stars. Which again might be surprising that it's so high up on my list, but I absolutely loved it so much. This is a retelling of Shakespeare's King Lear, so at the center of the story kind of is this story of this king who's slowly going mad, and he has to choose an heir between his 3 daughters. And so he asks all of his daughters to tell him how much they love him, and the one who proclaims their love the best is going to get the kingdom. The 2 daughters who do not like him that much just like promise him the world, tell him how much they love him, but the 3rd daughter refuses to take part in this contest because she thinks just it has to be enough that she loves him. It shows how much she loves him that she refuses to take part in this contest. And him, already being quite mad, can't see it that way, and so he banishes her. And that's kind of the central conflict of this story. This is very much kind of like what I know from Shakespeare's plays, that sometimes the action can get quite fast-paced, although most of the time this book is very slow-paced. It only gets fast like in the last 150 pages or so. But the focus of the story really are the characters, and it's all about those characters. It's kind of a character study, this whole book, and that's what I enjoyed the most. You kind of see the characters of the different sisters and the other like people that they meet along the way. You think a character is good only to turn out kind of morally grey or not so good, and they suddenly do something and you suddenly dislike them. And it's just, there is no perfect character in this book, and I absolutely adored that and loved that, and it just, I don't know, for some reason it just touched me really deeply, and so I would highly recommend you pick up this book if you do not mind a slower pace and not that much like plot-driven story in the book. My number 3 spot goes to none other than Brandon Sanderson and Starsight, which is the 2nd book in the Skyward series. Of course, Brandon Sanderson, as one of my favorite authors of all time, had to have an entry on this list. And the reason why it's so low for a Brandon Sanderson book is actually because I did not quite like it as much as Skyward, which doesn't have anything to do with the story itself, because I thought the story was absolutely well crafted and beautiful, but it just, there was a certain aspect that I loved about the first book that wasn't in this book, that was kind of absent, and that made me sad, and so I could only give it 4.5 stars and not 5 stars. But anyway, for those of you who don't know, this series, the Skyward series, follows Spencer, who lives on a planet that for years has been constantly attacked by aliens. As such, the pilots are like the most honorable people on this planet, and Spencer wants to be a pilot because her father has been one as well. However, the thing about her father is that he fled during one of the attacks of the aliens and had to be shot down by his crew, and he went down in history as the biggest coward. And so, like, the pilots don't want to let Spencer into the piloting school, and it's kind of her dealing with that during the first book. And now in the 2nd book, it just changes completely. It's still all about Spencer and her interactions with others, but where the first book is more about the people's prejudices against Spencer and her dealing with that, and Spencer also kind of discovering stuff about herself and who she is, the 2nd book is more about Spencer dealing with her prejudices against others. More specifically the aliens, because we get to see a lot more of the aliens in this book. Also at the center of this book, Mbot, who is Spencer's AI fighter, kind of plays a lot more of a role, and it's kind of like asked a lot what makes someone human and what makes someone sentient, and I really enjoyed that as well. So highly recommend this one as well. My 2nd spot, and I was kind of surprised that when I thought about it that I put this higher than Starsight, is Dark Dawn by Jay Kristoff, which is the 3rd book in the Nevernight series. I really love this finale to the whole series. I did not think it's perfect because there were some decisions made that I think were just like too sentimental for my liking, but then again they also kind of made me cry and I kind of liked them, but I just don't think, like, I personally like them because they made me happy, but I did not think that in terms of finishing a series they were the best decision. So I kind of see why there's a lot of debate on whether or not this is a good final book or not. Nevertheless, I highly enjoyed it. I enjoyed that there was a lot more focus on Mia's relationships in this book. I really loved all of the relationships. I had my baby back. I'm not going to say more because that's spoilers. And yeah, the Nevernight series, for those of you who don't know, follows Mia, and her whole family has been killed when she was 11 years old. So she joins this assassin school to learn how to kill people, to exact her revenge on the people who killed her family. So pretty classic premise, and it's set in this kind of Roman Empire inspired world. But for this one as well, I have a whole review on the entire series, so if you want to know all of my thoughts on this series, I will leave that link down below as well, so go and check it out. My number one spot for 2019 goes to The Hand, the Eye and the Heart by Zoe Marriott. And this, funnily enough, is the second Mulan retelling on this list. However, this one also includes a main character who is non-binary. And I absolutely love that. I thought the representation was well done personally, but this is not a book written by a non-binary author, sadly, even though the author is part of the queer community, and she did have sensitivity readers. So sadly, I cannot say if the representation is well done, even though I personally enjoyed it. However, I did give this book to a friend of mine who does identify as non-binary, or who is non-binary, and they said that they also thought it was well done. So yeah, but then again, as far as I know, non-binary experiences can be very different depending on the person. So maybe even though it was well done representation for them, it might be different for someone else. Anyway, it's a classic Mulan story. You have someone who is the daughter of a man who is called to war, but since the father isn't exactly fit anymore to fight, they go out and instead join the army dressed up as a boy. And what I enjoyed personally is that it wasn't a story about them discovering that they're non-binary, or it wasn't even called non-binary, but it's just done very subtly. It's about your classic Mulan story, it's about fighting the war, but then subtly interwoven into everything, the main character kind of notices that they feel more comfortable dressed up, more androgynous, and not like being a girl in public. And I just really enjoyed that. So yeah, that was my number one spot for 2019. Anyway, that was it for my list of best books of 2019. Tell me in the comments down below if you read any of the books that I have read and if you enjoyed them as much as I did. And if you didn't, why didn't you enjoy them as much as I did? Tell me in the comments down below what your best books of 2019 were. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out. Again, all the reviews that I have for books on this list will also be linked down below, as well as my other two videos that I already did to wrap up 2019. And with that said, all the links to my social media, did I say that? I'll link down below. And yeah, I hope you had a great start into 2020, and I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!